Today, we're going to be looking at all the possible scenarios for either candidate to win in 2024. Make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe for more content just like this. So, for the safe Republican states, we have Idaho, Montana, Utah, Wyoming, both Dakotas, all of Nebraska except the 2nd Congressional District, the state of Kansas, Oklahoma, Alaska, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, as well as Missouri, South Carolina, and Maine's 2nd Congressional District, including Iowa and Ohio, as well as Texas and Florida. These are all states that more than likely will go to former President Donald Trump. He has won all these states before in the last presidential cycles and has performed decently well here. And the nationwide popular vote is probably going to shift to the right this cycle. And as of right now, all of these states, especially states like Texas, Iowa, and Ohio, as well as Florida, are not trending to the left hard enough to be competitive this cycle, or are trending to the right and are kind of becoming out of reach for national Democrats. For the safe Democrat states, we have those of Washington, Oregon, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Illinois, the state of New York, as well as Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Rhode Island, Maryland, D.C., as well as Maine's 1st Congressional District. Joe Biden performed extremely well in all of these states, and Colorado is trending heavily to the left and will now be added in this safe Democrat column. These are not exact margins, however, these do give a pretty good idea of where either candidate is going to be the strongest, and all of these states will go to either one of these candidates by over 8 points for the sake of this video. All of the 128 toss-up electoral votes are all of the states that either candidate could realistically win this year. And so, to fill in some of the lean Democrat states, just for the sake of right now, New Mexico has been really good for Democrats the past couple of years. It's kind of been shifting to the left a pretty decent amount due to Hispanics initially doing well with Obama, in 2008. However, recently Donald Trump has picked up national Hispanic support, and there may be a sleeper flip in the state of New Mexico for the former president potentially, but for now we'll give it into the lean column for Harris. This will also go for the state of Minnesota. This state has not voted for a Republican since Nixon in the 1972 presidential election, and although it has moved to the center of the country more than what it was in '84 when Ronald Reagan narrowly lost it to Mondale, which was Mondale's home state, the state has not budged enough to flip into the Republican column like Republicans wish it would. Maine at large, as of right now, has never really been within 2 points for Donald Trump, and our current moving average has Harris up by about 3 or 4 points there. And so I think it's safe to say that more than likely the state is in the lean Democrat column. Looking for the lean Republican states, North Carolina is in this column right now. This state has voted for Donald Trump twice, and although Joe Biden did do better in it in the previous cycle, Harris will more than likely lose ground in the state of North Carolina. It has been slowly trending to the left. However, this cycle, I expect it to trend to the right, and it has become a very MAGA-friendly Republican state to the point where I just can't really see Harris winning it in a more likely scenario. In an unrealistic best-case scenario, you could say she does win all of the swing states from 2020 plus North Carolina, but right now I think it goes in the former president's column. Now, all of these states in blank, the 95 electoral votes, are all states that really could basically go either way within a realistic realm. Now, Georgia right now, as of this point in time, I think does go to Donald Trump. That would put him at 251 electoral college votes, bringing him really close to winning the presidency. But I think right now with the state of Georgia, Donald Trump is going to improve in the Atlanta city and suburbs just enough to be able to win it, even in a scenario where he potentially loses the election. So I'd say that more than likely this is probably out of reach for Harris, but it is still realistically attainable for her in an electoral scenario. And I also think that Wisconsin may be a problem for her. I think in the driftless area, she's going to massively underperform in the driftless area where a lot of white working class voters are. And so no matter what happens in the Milwaukee suburbs and even northern Wisconsin, I think that the western part of the state is really going to give her trouble, and I think Donald Trump's going to perform extremely well for a Republican ticket, and I think that really puts Donald Trump's floor at 261 electoral votes right now. I still think New Hampshire goes to her in an electoral college scenario right now, although it could become somewhat competitive. Donald Trump is technically up in our moving average. However, I do have Harris narrowly up in the state right now in my latest forecast. Virginia could also be a sleeper flip. You did have Glenn Youngkin push an executive order that only paper ballots would be allowed in the state of Virginia, and he kind of has terraformed the state to be a little bit more competitive. I mean, he's got over a 60% approval rating in a state that Biden won by 10 points, and Trump really only lost it by 5 in 2016. And there's a lot of questions about 2020 and how that could have possibly been some sort of a fluke year. However, this really puts 4 swing states into the extremely competitive category. Now, what's fascinating is you could even argue that Nevada may even be in the column of possibly, not going to Harris, because Harris may underperform with Hispanics very, very heavily, to the point where it's going to probably end up being pretty difficult for her to even end up getting close to winning Nevada. I mean, it's realistically attainable. The Democrats have won it for many years now, ever since, 2008. However, I think Donald Trump doing 15, 20 points better with Hispanics is probably going to give the state to Donald Trump, and I think it may be kind of difficult for Harris to win it right now. And so Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nebraska second are really the ones that are in question. Now, we're going to go over a couple of electoral scenarios for both candidates. For Harris, her easiest, path to the presidency is literally just Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and getting New Hampshire and Virginia, as well as Nebraska second. Usually Nebraska, New Hampshire, Virginia would be in that pretty safe Democrat column. This would bring Harris to a 270 margin. This, I think, is one of her more realistic paths to the White House. Democrats have won the Rust Belt trio of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania most of the time since the 1992 election. Donald Trump bucked this trend and flipped the blue wall in 2016. However, Harris could potentially win all 3 of these states and possibly win through a 270 path. However, her other scenario is not winning Wisconsin. Like I mentioned, Donald Trump probably has a pretty strong appeal in Wisconsin right now. So let's say Donald Trump wins Wisconsin, Georgia, and Nevada. Let's say Wisconsin just trends too far to the right for Harris to even possibly win it. And Arizona potentially votes for Harris because the state has been moving to the left quite rapidly. This would give Harris a 271 electoral college vote margin victory. We could also see another scenario in the electoral college where Trump is improving with Hispanics quite a bit and somehow wins Arizona but loses Georgia and Pennsylvania due to supercharged African American turnout. But I'd say this is the least likely scenario out of all 3 elections. These are the 3 realistic paths for Harris to win the White House. I cannot see Harris winning every single swing state this cycle. She is a far weaker candidate than Joe Biden was, and so I really don't think it's going to be attainable for her to get the 306 to 232 electoral college victory that the incumbent president did back 4 years ago. However, I do think it's possible for her to win a majority of the swing states. And those were the 3 paths for her that I find the most realistic. I mean, you could technically cook up in Arizona, Nevada, Arizona, Virginia, and somehow she gets Michigan. That could produce a 269 tie, and then you have New Hampshire and Nebraska second. That is a path to the White House. Nevada, if Trump does not actually or lose there, if Trump doesn't lose there, that opens up a pretty discrete path where, let's say Arizona, Georgia, and Michigan all trend to the left, but Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Nevada kind of continue their rightward trends. If they do, then you could get a Trump path of exactly 270 electoral votes through Nevada, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Another path, which is very simple but very unrealistic, is Pennsylvania and Georgia being the 2 states Trump wins to get to 270. This is why a lot of the ad revenue money is going to Georgia and Pennsylvania on the Republican side, because that is the simplest path for Trump to win the White House. Now, I do think Trump should try to win more than 270 electoral votes. However, this would be the easiest path for him to win the presidency. Another path is winning through the Sun Belt and then picking off any one of these other states, including Nebraska second, which would actually produce an electoral college tie, which would go to the House of Representatives, but would still more than likely result in a Donald Trump victory because he would probably be elected through the House of Representatives. He could probably also win this more than likely through Wisconsin. That is the most likely path I see him winning through. If he's winning the Sun Belt, he probably wins through Wisconsin or possibly even does Pennsylvania, because if he's doing this well in the Sun Belt, he's probably outperforming with African American voters. And since Pennsylvania has a larger African American population than Wisconsin, maybe this is the potential winning path for Donald Trump in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, it could be an interesting election because let's say, what if, like I talked about this scenario happening where Trump gets 270 through Pennsylvania and Georgia. Let's say that, Harris unexpectedly does well with a certain type of white voter. Let's say she kind of edges out all these swing states like Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan. Let's say she edges it out, but doesn't perform well enough with African Americans in Georgia. That probably is going to be Trump's easiest flip of the night, is the state of Georgia. That's probably going to be his easiest flip. It is the most conservative out of all of the swing states and has voted for Republicans ever since the 1990s. And so this would probably be Trump's easiest flip. Now, the way that Trump could do 270 here is, let's say he underperforms with white voters, but for whatever reason, the assassination attempt does produce sort of a sympathy vote for him in the state of Pennsylvania. That could potentially shape the election to, if he underperforms everywhere else, but Pennsylvania is sympathetic towards him because of the assassination attempt and kind of bucks traditional trends, it could potentially get him the election. So really, for Democrats, it's kind of inconvenient that that happened in Pennsylvania because that could actually realistically produce this possibility. Normally, this map would really be this. However, because of the assassination attempt, this Pennsylvania-Georgia path may actually be pretty possible. Now, some of the more unconventional paths for either candidate to win, you could potentially have a Harris win, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and potentially get New Hampshire and Virginia, as well as Minnesota. This is sort of a very unrealistic path where she kind of wins through the Sun Belt and gets North Carolina. But if she's getting North Carolina, she probably wins all the other Rust Belt states, unless Trump is just doing that well with white working class voters that don't like Kamala Harris. Then maybe there is some sort of weird diversion here. However, I don't think that this would happen. Looking at, the rest of the states, a very unconventional way for Trump to win the White House would potentially be this sort of northeastern path where he wins Maine at large, New Hampshire, he kind of wins Pennsylvania and Georgia and North Carolina. This is sort of an unconventional path. Or let's say he loses Pennsylvania, but potentially wins Virginia. This could be another unconventional path. The polling in Virginia shows close races, considering that all the other states, the state polls have moved to the left quite a bit, but Virginia's polling has basically only shifted a little bit to the left since, a few weeks ago. So that is really fascinating there. Now, looking at some other weird scenarios for Trump to win, he could actually just win through Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and, North Carolina. That could be a possible pathway. Another pathway could potentially be, a Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania pathway. If he just really outperforms with white working class voters, he literally wouldn't have to worry about any other state and could actually buck the whole North Carolina trend if somehow Harris were to win that state. Now, another strategy he has is sort of this Sun Belt strategy. So if he basically gets Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, and Nevada, that gets him to 270. Or if he gets New Mexico, he actually ties in the Electoral College. But let's say he doesn't get Virginia. If he gets Arizona and Nevada, he actually wins with 273. So if he does well enough with Hispanic and black voters, he may potentially be able to win the election through the Sun Belt and not even worry about a state like Wisconsin, where I think he's pretty poised to win nonetheless. And so, based out of this map, based off of the fact that Trump has won in North Carolina a bit, the fact that, Minnesota and New Mexico have gone to Democrats as well as Maine, really, it's going to be hard for me to really see a lot of paths for Harris to win. Those three paths that I cooked up for Harris are really the most realistic ways for her to win. Trump this time is the candidate that has multiple paths to win. In 2020, really the only realistic pathway for him was pretty much through Wisconsin and Arizona. That was the only realistic path he had, and Nebraska second. But back then, Nebraska second was probably going to go Democrat anyway, and this actually would have resulted in a tie in the Electoral College. So really the only realistic path I could have cooked up for him at the time was literally Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. Now Harris is the one that has very limited paths to the White House. Trump is the one that now has the, everlasting amount of paths to win the presidency, which range all the way from Virginia, the Northeast, the Rust Belt, as well as the Sun Belt. So guys, if you did enjoy this video and analysis, make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And I will see you guys in the next video.